Thank you, members. During the closed session, members considered sensitive personal data, which was necessary so that members could have due regard to the public sector equality duty by being in receipt of all relevant information relating to this application. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed on Leeds City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. Speakers addressing the panel, therefore, need to be mindful about disclosing any personal data about themselves, members of their family, or any third parties. We have speakers against the proposal. Could I invite them to the, oh, they're here, excellent. Once you're ready, you'll have 6 minutes to share between you to put your case to the panel, and can I remind you to please not touch upon information that may be contained within the exempt appendix. Okay.
Good afternoon. I would like to highlight two issues which are of great concern to the current residents on the boundaries of this development. There has been 2 site surveys carried out on the land which samples were taken, one as a result of the outline planning application and one as a result of the reserved matters application. These findings have not been made public. The land was previously used as a council refuse tip. The reports of the analysis of samples taken should be made public so that they can be scrutinised and commented upon. There is concerns by the current residents that asbestos or other damaging materials could be present in this land, as asbestos was used on a wide range of products in the 1940s and 50s. Objections have been submitted by current residents for plots 1, 41 and 42, 53 and 54 should be removed from the outline plan, and the path, which has been rerouted between plot 54 and the southern boundaries, should be removed. The rerouting of the path is seen by the current residents as a provocative act and is unnecessary. It will not be able to be overseen by or under surveillance by the new residents and could become a prime location for antisocial behaviour. Residents have consistently objected to homes being built on the southern boundary and that a sizable buffer zone be planted with trees which will reduce the impact of the development and ensure that current residents are not overlooked. We're just looking for compromise. Residents recommend that the land is confirmed as not contaminated and that plots mentioned above, together with a rerouted path, be removed from the plan and that planting of trees be a condition which will allow some of the biodiversity of this site to be retained. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously a very sensitive issue, and you've been in private session discussing private matters, which I don't want to allude to, other than the fact that they're of a very serious nature. I first raised these issues 18 months ago with the Director of Planning and with the Chief Exec of Leeds City Council, Tom Reardon. I acquainted them with the details, although not going into too many personal details other than the very serious nature of the issues. It was raised with Leeds Federated Housing Association, and it's taken 18 months to get to this stage. 18 months of pure hell for my constituent. I'd like you to put, if you would, the plan up on the screen, the site plan. We're talking about 2 plots actually, but I'll come back to the main issue in a moment. First of all, there's the plots 41 and 42, where 42 is again extremely near to the boundary of the house on Alcoats Road. Far too near, in my view. But then we come to plots 54 and 51. I have been suggesting for some considerable time that there is a way to resolve it in a more reasonable fashion, and that is to either relocate plot 50, 53 and 54 or to drop them. As far as I'm concerned, Leeds Federated no. Leeds Federated no. Or planners tell me they've been informed of that. And yet, throughout that, they've insisted on them remaining there, but they are the most damaging. As regards minimal impact by removing them, I would contest that. I think the removal of those 2 plots from that place would make a much more workable green buffer. And as has already been said, the rerouting of this footpath that they've put in to the top side of the pink dwellings, plots 51 and 52, would be much more sense. I have no idea why, given that the applicant is now saying how concerned they are and what the mitigation measures are, they've sought to put a footpath in the middle of it. That just seems to me, as Mr. Walker has said, to be adding insult to injury. So the simple fact is this: why over 18 months has the applicant not addressed the issues that have been being raised through the Chief Planning Officer and through the Chief Exec? Why have we reached this stage? So much suffering for my constituent, which is wholly unacceptable. And at the end of the day, it is the planning committee's decision. The planners should be there to help you come to a sensible and reasonable conclusion, not necessarily just to try and throw obstacles in the way, which I seem to have encountered throughout this last 18 months, which I regard as unacceptable. And I appreciate that planning officers have been back to the applicant. But at the end of the day, we are the planning authority, you are the planning members, it's your decision. And I want you to reflect on that and reflect on the very confidential information that you've all been given, quite devastating information. And I hope you'll reflect on that when you realise it is your decision, not the planning officers, not us, not the applicant, but you. Thank you.
Hi, I've only got a short statement to make. I entrusted the council and Leeds Federated Housing almost 2 years ago with the most sensitive personal information anyone could hold. I did this with the belief and trust that a full risk assessment would take place and medical professionals consulted to safeguard my son. It has still not been done. Therefore, what evidence do you have that the conditions you seek to impose on the application will mitigate risk? After the breach of GDPR this week by Leeds City Council, I have no faith, no trust in this council to safeguard my son. It surely cannot be lawful to grant permission to a planning application that poses a risk to life.
Thank you. Do members have any questions to the speakers? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Carter, you referenced an alternative suggestion about moving. Could we have this slide back up? Sorry, the layout slide. I think I follow, but could you just repeat for us what it is that your alternative suggestion was?
Mike, please, Councillor Carter.
States they're unable to move the plots because of water attenuation tank. I find it difficult to believe the water attenuation tank covers the whole of the top part of that green space, or it's beyond the wit of man to relocate 2 plots elsewhere. Bear in mind, the applicant, first of all, came in with a planning application for 77 dwellings. It's now 54. So it seems to me that it's perfectly possible. And what's, I suppose, very annoying is the fact that these things have been suggested and the answer we've got is that it can't be done. Well, I spent most of my life in working life allied to the building industry. and can't usually means won't. And I can tell you that if that is what the developers are faced with, they will find a way to do it. And you need to get to the bottom of whether that can be done or not. And the distance that would create as a buffer would be significant. If we want to guess at how significant, well, anyone's guess is as good as anybody else's. And off the cuff predictions of how much it would improve matters are just that, off the cuff.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch your name, the lady on the left, but
Emma.
sorry, hi Emma. You mentioned in your comments risk assessments. So in your view, is what Councillor Carter just referred to in terms of moving the properties, do you feel that would overcome those risks, or is the issue with the totality of the development itself?
The only way that risk can be mitigated fully is by stopping the development. And I understand and accept that that cannot happen. Throughout life, I mitigate risk every single minute of every single day that I enter a shopping centre. We go to school. I've got a 50-page risk assessment at school for how I mitigate risk. I understand what this development will do to my son. By moving those plots away from our buffer will obviously mitigate an element of risk. We can't get rid of risk, but we will mitigate it further.
Members, any other questions at all? Councillor Cavani.
Yeah, thank you. First gentleman, sorry I didn't get your name, who spoke, mentioned that the path had been rerouted to go between the properties on Alcourts Road and the new ones. Where was it originally sited? Hand up to show.
The previous location of the path was north of plot 51. And of course, it wound its way down towards the west. And for some reason, it's been changed to come between 54 and the southern boundary, which doesn't seem to have any reason why it should be done that way.
We were told, whilst we're in private session, this isn't private information, that if there were the plots, those two plots were moved up into the current green space where the attenuation tank is, that the attenuation tank would replace them. Effectively, they do a swap of the two, and that the attenuation tank dig out would cause as much, if not more, of a problem than the two properties. Is that information that any of the objectors have been told?
That's what all three of us have been told. I don't buy it for a minute. I don't believe the attenuation tank covers the whole of that top part of the green space. I don't believe that, given the fact that the initial planning application was for 70 odd dwellings, that they can't find a relocation for two plots. They must be able to do, and if they can't, then they should be dropped from the plan completely.
Any further questions from members? No? In which case, thank you very much for coming to state your case. And if we can have the speakers in support of the application, if I can invite you to the table, and once you're ready, you'll have 6 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I will try and address some of the questions that have been raised, but I've got a pre-prepared speech as well, if you just bear with me. Chair and members, good afternoon. Prior to submission of this application, we engaged the local community we met ward councillors, and we also undertook formal pre-application discussions with your officers. Over a period of 14 months, Leeds Federated has listened to feedback from ward councillors, the case officer and consultees. The proposals have been amended on several occasions. For example, the original 3-storey block of apartments has been removed. The open space has been increased and moved to a more central location, and the number of homes has dropped from 66 to 54 units. That's far less than the 77 homes approved at outline planning stage. In relation to the household referred to under public sector equality duty, Leeds Federated is deeply sympathetic to their situation, and the scheme has been adapted to try and respond to their concerns as a result. My client has met the owners at their home. We have moved a number of plots to provide a separation distance significantly in excess of normal planning standards. And we have proposed a 3-metre deep landscape buffer immediately to the rear of their property to provide for greater privacy. Since the last planning panel meeting, the layout has been changed again and the separation distance has been further increased. I just want to make a point there, the question about the footpath, that the location of it, we changed in response to the feedback we received after the last panel meeting. It was our understanding that there was a desire for the footpath to be moved there, so the properties could be shunted further northwards to provide that greater separation. So that's why we moved the path there. We've looked into the scope to move plots even further away from number 74 since the last panel meeting. Councillor Carter touched on that. However, it is not possible to achieve this without a number of adverse consequences, which I'll come on to. The open space will be displaced to a less central location, which goes against previous design advice from your officers. It would also be a less regular shape of open space, which would impact on usability. The underground attenuation tank is significantly large. It does take up the northern half of that public open space. I'll give you the dimensions. It's 34.5 metres long, it's 13.5 metres wide, and it's 2.6 metres deep. It's a considerable tank. If you put housing plots in that part of the site, then the attenuation tank has to be displaced further south. That would mean deeper excavation work closer to number 74, creating more noise and construction disturbance for the household. Relocation of the attenuation tank would also mean that trees T3 and T4, which are category B trees, would have to be removed. Whilst further separation with number 74 cannot be achieved without these negative impacts, my client has consulted ground engineering experts, and we have suggested a number of tailored measures that can be undertaken during the construction phase to greatly minimise dust, vibration and disturbance to the property in question. I'm happy to discuss these with the local authority in more detail. These measures are set out at paragraph 68 of the panel report and can be secured as part of discharge of the outline planning permission construction management condition. My client has no issues with the case or suggestion of a 3-metre hoarding to the rear of properties on Alcoach Road during the construction period. Finally, you may wish to note that my client has no immediate plans to start on this site until 2025. This is an allocated site in a sustainable location, and the principal development, point of access and off-site highway works have already been established with the grant of outline permission. The development complies with the council's housing mix and space standard policies. It meets and exceeds council separation distances. On all of the homes will be affordable units, which substantially exceeds the usual 15% affordable requirement. This is a 100% affordable housing scheme supported by government agency Homes England. All of the homes will incorporate solar PV panels. The scheme provides for 90 new trees, nearly 600 metres of new hedgerow, and significant amounts of new shrub and grass planting, which will create new wildlife habitat on site. So that's all I want to say today. Leeds Federated has sought to address comments on this application in as sensitive manner as possible. It is considered the housing delivery benefits of this scheme in particular affordable housing, outweigh the limited impacts. I therefore urge you to determine the application in accordance with your office's recommendation, and thank you for listening.
Just before questions, Daniel, can you, I was just going to say, if the gentleman's speaking again, can we remove Councillor Carter's name, please? Thank you. Just it could be confusing outside.
Thank you. Have we got any questions from members? Councillor Ray, thank you.
Thank you for that. Just specifically, you said you wouldn't be looking to commence work into 2025. Have you got a slightly more specific timescale on that? Because that's 12 months. When in 2025?
I'm looking across to my client over there.
So
Do you just want to come and join us at the table?
Yeah, so Leeds Fed would probably start on site in early 2025, in line with our business plan to develop out this scheme. So it's a scheme supported by Homes England and make sure that we fulfill our obligations with Homes England. It will take us 12 months to go through a procurement process and find a suitable contractor to build this site for us. Hence why we think it's going to be 12 to 18 months time to build it.
So just two follow-on questions for that. So in terms of, if you will, the main construction, what quarter of what year are we looking at? I'll go to that subject. And secondly, you've obviously mentioned funding from Homes England. I take it the specific funding requirements that the funding have to be spent by a certain time or date. Could you please elaborate on that?
So our Homes England funding for this scheme, we're in something called a strategic partnership with Homes England, and our grant funding programme lasts till 2027. And we can hope to start this site in probably January, February 2025, so after Christmas. That's our ambition.
Just before the other members come in, are you happy to enter into a unilateral agreement around that start date? Councillor Stevenson?
Thanks, Chair. I have three questions. Just going back to the attenuation tank, can you just repeat those dimensions again, please?
It's 35 metres long, 13.5 metres wide, and 1.6 metres deep, but it needs a 1 metre additional cover over that 1.6 metre depth. There's also an easement zone around the attenuation tank as well, because we cannot build over third-party land or close to third-party land.
So have you just turn your mic off a sec, sorry. Have you explored, instead of having your tank like that, have you explored turning it round so you get the same volume in it, but use the less space on the ground?
Yeah, the architect who's designed the scheme, Sean.
Sean from Applicant Architects. I'll try and pick up on your point there. Obviously, I'm not a specialist drainage engineer, but having spoken to the drainage consultant, the issue you have is the deeper that you take the tank, the wider the easement zones have to be around the tank. So currently, as Mark was suggesting there, we've got a 2.5 metre easement around the tank. If you go deeper, those easement zones increase. So the impact actually gets worse. So there's a balance between the two.
Talk us through what you're describing as the easements.
Okay, so offset from the structure of the attenuation system, there is a zone around of which you cannot build or have other structures. There is also a further zone where trees cannot be planted. They could be new trees or they could be existing trees. So that compounds it further. This is a statutory authority requirement.
Thank you. In some of the conditions applied as an attempt to reduce dust particles. And you mentioned things like dampening down, like with I presume a water bowser, and it says as necessary. Would you have any objection to that being a much more a stricter condition and actually setting how often per day that would be required?
I think we can impose a condition like that. We can definitely set out the number of times we do dust suppression. We're happy to look at that further. It's something that we could look at doing if that would reassure the panel.
And finally, have you explored, we often impose conditions around vibration sensors where there's things like piling on a site. Have you explored dust particle sensors with an agreed upper limit to which it would be accepted that development would stop if it breached that limit?
I think that's something that we'd have to look into, and we do so with an open mind. We'd obviously be speaking to a main contractor and specialist contractor for that advice as well.
Thanks, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Finnegan, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. Just to develop that a little further, at paragraph 68, it talks about monitoring its sensitive boundaries. And developing what Councillor Stevenson was saying in terms of how you might actually monitor at that particular point, because we all have sites in our patch, and I've got a site in my patch where, you know, they claim to monitor the dust and it really doesn't happen. And what happens at this particular point is they get on to me, the residents, I get on to environmental health, and then there's usually some sort of accommodation reached at that point. This clearly taking into account the sensitivity of where we are at this stage. We don't want to be messing around with that. We want to make sure that whatever monitoring is in place is robust and clear before there's even a spade put into this particular soil. So I know that it drives us nuts that these conditions are so vague that your chance of getting planning enforcement to do much about it are usually pretty slim. How do we make that as robust as possible? So, as Councillor Stevenson says, it's monitored regularly, and at a point where you hit a certain point, that's it. We all stop until the dust levels are dealt with at this particular point. That's one question. The other question is in terms of Homes England, is the finance guaranteed? So if for whatever reason you couldn't start in 2025, or you were starting in 2026 or 2027, is the money still guaranteed at that particular point if there are any reasons you couldn't start for whatever?
If I could just take the first point, Councillor. These measures were suggested in paragraph 68. They came from Sirius, who are the ground contractor for Leeds Fed. We're happy to discuss them further. The mechanism for actually securing them is not through the reserve matters consent, it's through discharge of a condition on the outline planning permission. So there's a condition on the outline planning permission that requires us to submit a construction management plan to the council for the council's approval to discharge that condition. So actually, if the council isn't happy with what we submit as part of that condition discharge, you don't have to discharge the condition. So you hold that ultimate authority to be satisfied. So I think that's how you can be comforted that we can get these measures right, as good as they possibly can be. In terms of the second question you raised, I'm going to pass that on to my client again.
Leeds Fed with Homes England has a commitment to deliver 168 affordable homes using grant funding with Homes England. So the grant for this scheme is secure. The obligation on Leeds Fed is to complete our grant funded programme by 2027. If we didn't complete the scheme by then, we'd forfeit the final grant payment from Homes England.
Thank you. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions relating to our paragraph 68. The first one, just so we have this in the record, can you confirm that these suggested mitigations are a package to address the issue of dust on the site as a whole? We're not talking about part of the site here, but the whole site.
They are for the entire site, but they have been prepared with the particular household we're talking about in mind.
Okay, thank you. Can you quantify in any way what impact you expect it to have? I mean, will it dispose of 40% of the dust, 80%? I mean, I appreciate you're not going to be able to give us a figure to 3 decimal places, but you must have some idea.
It's not quantifiable, license.
Not quantifiable at all. Okay, and just finally, just something I spotted in here. So, just wondered if you could help me. One of the terms, fence netting. I was struggling a bit to understand how any kind of netting can mitigate dust risk. The nature of netting, it just sort of seems like, well, dust will blow through it. Could you help us to understand that bit, please?
I think the relevant response for that question is the suggested condition that the case officer has put in really now, which supersedes it, which is the installation of a 3 metre high hoarding. So essentially, that's a fixed barrier, isn't it? That would supersede the netting.
So the netting's redundant.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Malacca.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, possibly. Would you then consider, if anything, the removal of the 2 properties if they cannot be swapped at all? I appreciate that this is, possibly starting in, early 2025, like you said. Would you ever consider removing the 2 properties closer to, the subject right now, when it comes to the term?
Very difficult question because the proposal is before you. This is what's before you, and it's already a very low density. And every one of these houses is affordable housing. So if you take those plots out, it's less affordable housing for people who need new homes. That's all I can say from a planning point of view. From a business point of view, it's my client's decision. But this is the scheme before the committee today.
I just agree with Mark. What Leeds Fed's trying to achieve here is to deliver the greatest number of affordable housing, and obviously Leeds has a great housing need, especially in that ward. And I think it'd be a great loss to lose any unit for a house that could be warmly welcomed from a family in that area. So I think it'd be a shame to lose any units.
Councillor Gavani.
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned about the footpath being moved after consultation with residents. Yet we've heard that the residents are complaining. Have I misunderstood that? I think I might have.
After the last panel meeting, the application was deferred, but we received some feedback following that meeting, because members have been on site visit, and our understanding was that was a specific request of the panel. to put the footpath through there. So it's something we did in response to what we thought was a request. Now, if that's not what is desired, then that's something we can consider. We did it in response to member comments, we thought.
The other questions again around some of this mitigation that's mentioned. We heard earlier from the officer that he thinks most dust is generated by the movement of vehicles in and out. Now, what you say in paragraph 68 is damped down as necessary and checked daily for effectiveness. I've seen quite a few building sites where ordinary sort of wheel scrubs to avoid contaminating the local roads fail miserably. Would it be possible that for every vehicle movement in or out, the damping down is automatic? So on vehicle sensors. So as they enter that entrance roadway, it starts the spray going. As they leave, it stops it.
I think that's something we could certainly look at, yes. Yeah.
Before I bring in Councillor Ray, I'm going to take Chair's prerogative and ask a question myself. In terms of the things like, and it's related to what we heard about the issues with dust on the construction road. At what point from the moment spades go in the ground on that road to the end of the development, will those 3 metre hoardings go in? Because obviously to erect the 3 metre hoardings, I guess you need the road in order to get the items in to build it.
To erect the hoarding, you'd probably be doing it at the same time you would be securing the site, putting round tree protection fencing. So you wouldn't necessarily need to put any other highway works or temporary highway works in to do that. Contractors would have suitable equipment to be able to do those works.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Ray.
It's really in response to a question, the answer to a question of my colleague. So you've submitted that the mitigation measures you've put in are effectively reasonable, but you've just said you can't quantify how much of a difference it makes. That seems quite counterintuitive, because you must have been able to quantify to a certain level what impact it will have to give an opinion that it's actually going to mitigate it. So you're advising us that you've made no calculation to assess actually what amount it would reduce on a normal non-dry day. Obviously, appreciate on a dry day it's more dusty, etc. But are you really saying you do not have a quantifiable figure to say how much it's actually going to reduce the dust by?
Well, we sought advice from ground experts who are used to seeing plenty of dust on construction sites, and these are the range of measures they felt were most appropriate to address dust and limit it on the site. Ultimately, this is going to be a construction site. There is going to be earth moving, there is going to be vehicle movements in and out of the site. It's very difficult to give you precise figures that you seek.
I'm not asking for precise figures. I'm asking, bearing in mind the nature of what we were considering in the closed session and the impact, and that one of the things we have to do is effectively assess whether or not we feel those mitigations are strong enough that you cannot provide us even a rough. We're not asking for parts per million, but actually on an average day when it's not overly dry, the mitigation measures we put in, we think will reduce the dust by 35%, 45%. I appreciate it's never going to be that exact, but just for, you're asking us to take on grace your experts' advice when actually you can't quantify the figure to us. Can you understand how that seems a little unreasonable, bearing in mind the nature of the reason why we're having these discussions today?
We can't give you those figures today, but when we come to discharge the condition and provide the formal submission of the plan, that's the sort of information we can try and provide for discharge.
Any other questions? Councillor Campbell.
Can we go back to the tank? Can I ask why you decided to go for a tank as opposed to a pond? Because a pond would, in fact, greatly improve your biodiversity and work as well, hopefully.
Yes, this was something that was looked at the beginning of the design process. Inevitably, detention basins and ponds take up a large area. What would happen as a result of that is there's two things on this site. Firstly, it would take up a lot more space on the site, which would mean you would be compromising aspect related design and space around dwellings and pushing them closer to boundaries as a result. You've got the geological nature of the site as well to take into consideration, and the opinions of our specialist drainage consultant were that the most appropriate solution was an attenuation system, which Yorkshire Water would fully adopt.
Okay, one more opportunity. Any final questions from members? No? Okay, in which case, thank you very much. And we will move to questions for officers. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. Officers, please can you show us the design that's been submitted by the applicant for the attenuation tank, the profiles, etc.?
We do not have that detail at this point in time. The layout submitted was only revised about 2 weeks ago and is not supported by technical drawings. If you go to the layout, I don't know if we can put the slide back on. It is literally located in that square there. But because the layout was changed following the deferral at the last panel meeting, we haven't got the updated technical drawings.
So what you're asking of us today then, as decision makers, is to delegate and defer to you those reserved matters that you're asking us to make a decision on.
The drainage scheme isn't a reserved matter, it's a condition of the outline consent. So it is covered, and the drainage assessment and the drainage matters were considered at the outline stage, not the reserved matters.
But do you agree that the nature of our conversation being around layout, that the decisions we may have to make on layout will have an effect on that? We're having a conversation about whether it's possible to change the layout because of the attenuation tank, but you haven't actually got at your disposal the current suggestions for the attenuation tank. So when we're being told today that the measurements are X, Y, Z, and we can't do any different, we don't actually have any plans before us collectively as decision makers or a planning authority to corroborate that, do we?
I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of the applicants, and they may correct me if what I'm saying isn't correct, but I think a developer wouldn't want to invest the technical expertise in doing a set of technical drawings on a revised layout, which isn't going to get the support of members. It is a condition of the outline consent. It isn't something that the drainage details were conditioned on the outline, and we haven't got an application in yet to discharge the conditions. Generally, in the chronological order of an application, we'd only get an application in to discharge the planning conditions if the reserved matters got approval. It's a bit premature at this point in time to submit a scheme to approve the drainage when we haven't agreed the layout at the reserved matter stage.
So have you given due regard to, have you assessed on the reduced number of houses that this is now being revised down to 54, have you made an assessment on what the need of the attenuation tank is now it's been reduced?
Both Yorkshire Water and Mains Drainage, which is the internal water team at Leeds City Council, have not raised any objection to the size of the tank. And that is based on the 54, not the 66 houses.
Councillor Buckley, did I see you indicate? No. Councillor Finnegan.
I'd be interested, Ian, in your view on the pond, because I know your colleagues at Nature Conservation are concerned about the biodiversity loss. And it just seems they do look a lot better than a green space that's got a bloody great big tank stuck underneath it anyway. And also in terms of discharging conditions, I know we've had a conversation about monitoring dust and other such things. At the point where you're thinking about discharging the conditions in terms of the dust monitoring, would it be the standard way that planning would deal with it, that talk to environmental health colleagues about, you know, levels of dust and taking into account the sensitivity of this particular case? Clearly those levels perhaps would need to be lower than we would expect in different circumstances. Is that where environmental health are likely to be involved, so that before you discharge any conditions, it needs to be at this level, we need to monitor it this way, and environmental health sign it off? If that makes sense.
Ultimately, a decision on a condition discharge is made by the local planning authority, not a consultee. We would seek advice from environmental health on what would be acceptable. And we have got a expertise in-house which has already offered us advice on this. But ultimately, we can't determine a construction management plan until one has been put forward to us. But internally, yes, we have got that expertise and it would go through that process. Exactly. So you're asking, would a pond be preferable? Is that your question?
A pond would achieve what needs to be done in terms of land drainage ways. It would help, as Councillor Campbell's already pointed out, in terms of biodiversity. What are the planning authorities' concerns about such a pond? An attenuation pond rather than a tank that's deep, very deep.
Steve, I'm happy to answer. Okay. On this scheme, which we've already alluded to, the density does not meet the minimum requirements of policy, and putting a pond on this site would further decrease that, because obviously the way the scheme is at the moment, it serves a dual function, because you kind of fit open space above the tank. If you have a pond, you'd have to have them side by side, so it'd be less affordable housing. And our view is the density on this is already low, and we wouldn't want to do anything which would further reduce that.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, in relation to 59 and 60 on the report, and it affected the biodiversity net loss, which is contrary to policy. Okay. Who made the decision that, as this application is technically contrary to policy, we were still going ahead with it?
The decision obviously is made, it's a recommendation to the panel. The officer's recommendation is to improve, because on balance, with every planning act, there is going to be pros and cons. And our view on this is the 100% affordable housing, which is in way excess of the minimum requirement of 15%, outweighs that loss. I also want to make it clear in the energy statement, there is an exceedance of policy EM1. So it is a balance, and our view is it should be improved, and the benefits outweigh the loss of biodiversity. Obviously, as well, at the time of the outline consent, it wasn't a requirement, and any biodiversity net gain, which would be compensated through a sum, which is the only way you can really do in greenfield sites when you've got housing on, has to be secured through a Section 106 agreement, and you're not able to secure that on a reserved matters.
Sorry, Chair. I think Nicole just wanted to add a little bit just to clarify the issues about the what happened on the outline.
Yes, members. Biodiversity net gain was dealt with correctly, well, at the appropriate stage, which was the outline stage. And at that time, the emergent biodiversity requirements weren't in existence, and so it was our core strategy policy G9 that the application will have been assessed against. And at that point, members, when making the decision on the outline application must have been satisfied that on balance, what we required or did not require in relation to biodiversity net gain was acceptable. So this is not the correct or appropriate point to be able to retrofit that situation.
Councillor Ray?
Has the planning authority seen an estimate of the impact of the dust mitigation, or are they just relying, as is the developer, on the opinion of their expert advice without actually submitting any figures?
As I've stated, the construction management plan is a condition of the outline, and we haven't had an application yet to discharge any of the conditions which were placed in the outline consent. We have raised this issue with the developers, and the measures which they have said they are going to include in the construction management plan are highlighted in paragraph 68. But at this point in time, we haven't got an application for that yet. So the answer to your question is no.
Okay, so bearing in mind the particular sensitivities of the reason why this application is before us, and particularly bear in mind the sensitivities outlined within the closed session, and therefore the importance that has potentially on the decision being made by members today, would that not have been maybe something that we would have asked for in advance? I appreciate it's not the normal process and there's a normal timing to these things, but this is not a normal application because of the sensitivities.
Sorry, Chair. It's only really been mentioned because of the public sector duty, but I mean, what I've captured here, because of course at some point I'll have to try and follow up, which is always the best bit of it for me. Ian's right. Only latterly has all the measures and the issues related to the person we've been talking about have come to light. So that's come through later. So we've not had the opportunity to do what you've suggested. However, the things I've picked up here ultimately, and I'll go through them again at a later date, is that members, if they should be minded to go with the recommendation, it would add the unilateral agreement to not start construction prior to January 25 for the reasons that we discussed previously. Tighten up the construction management plan when we get the detail to so how can I put maximize the effect of the use of the spraying system, automatic dampening, particle monitoring was mentioned obviously by the applicants of this. Put all that into the construction management plan, which would obviously be within consultation of environmental health. So those things would be captured at that point. And I say I've got them here, but we will get the detail and do that as hard. I don't know how to put this, but we'd make it sure it was as foolproof as it possibly could be, bearing in mind the circumstances in consultation with environmental health.
I can just quickly come back and thank you for that. I also think, again, without obviously going into the specific details of the case in question, that perhaps some external expert advice from relevant bodies in the health field would probably would be useful, not just our environmental protection team, but people that actually have a knowledge of the impact of dust on people's health, particularly on health sensitivities, to help inform that management plan.
Sorry, Councillor, you might have to ask that again in just a moment.
Yeah. Sorry, I know it's a problem. I didn't catch the question, so we may have to come back to Councillor Ray. But what the chair was just suggesting, I was just making sure it was okay, was that if it helps to put members' minds at rest, and this has come from Councillor Bithell, that actually in the process of discussing that construction management plan and those details, that the chair was also involved in that to make sure that it was what members in the panel actually specified.
Which is again a good suggestion. I think that the specific panel is making sure that the advice is not just from our environmental protection team, which have obviously a particular expertise in a certain field, but not particularly an expertise in the field that's probably relevant to the reason why we're asking for these mitigations.
I think it's something we'd have to seek advice from environmental health as to whether they consider that necessary. I mean, they are experts in their field, which includes dust suppression measures as well. And clearly they're satisfied on certain other schemes, just to give you that comfort that dust suppression measures can be quite significant in terms of the reduction, because I think that's what originally you were asking about. How effective would those measures be? And clearly on other sites, we've sought measures that would be significantly effective in suppressing dust. So we can give you some comfort that the measures that we will require will be effective from that perspective, and we will ensure that Environmental Health seek further advice if they feel it's necessary beyond their current level of expertise.
Thank you. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question in relation to paragraph 60, the biodiversity net loss. Councillor Campbell anticipated it about 100% actually, so just skip that one. But on paragraph 58, looking at the percentage that's given here for a reduction in predicted CO2 emissions, 20.62%. Can you tell me compared to what? What's the baseline for that calculation, please?
I'm afraid I can't answer that. You'd have to, it's whether the applicants would be able to answer that question because it's based on a study that they've done, not us as the local planning authority.
Applicants, is that something you'd like to come back and answer? You'll have to come back so that it can be seen on. Thank you.
Yes, that will be based on current building regulations. So the minimum performance there.
Right, so that's like a current like industry standard of what you would expect a house on them with current systems and current emissions to produce.
Yes, under building regulations approved Part L, there are different methods in which reductions can be achieved. The Leeds planning policy asks for a further reduction of CO2 emissions. Through the calculations which we've submitted as part of the application material, we've demonstrated we've actually achieved a 20% reduction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, I've got Councillor Finnegan and then I've got a question. So if anyone else would like to ask any questions of officers, please can you indicate while Councillor Finnegan is speaking, please?
Thanks, Chair. What would a plans panel be without me whinging on about EN1? And I'm delighted that this is doing up and above what we've got an EN1. And you know, I'm a man of faith, but I do ask for these figures every bloody plans panel time, and I never get these figures every bloody panel's time. I'm pleased that we've actually achieved it with this, and I'm absolutely sure that we do it this, but I'd like to see the figures that show that 40% standard energy demand is going to be provided. And I accept there are solar panels on every roof, and that's a good news story at this particular point. But I have sat here month after month after month raising the same issues, and I am assured, Councillor, that you will get these figures on applications, because we'll be running this same debate on the next one where there are no figures, and we're just giving assurances. So please, 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 just to shut me up if nothing else, and that'll please the rest of the panel, can we have the figures on all of these applications? Because if we don't, I'm going to be asking. Thanks, Chair.
Noted. Councillor Acker, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm just going to go back to appreciating the affordability side of things in terms of the, you know, the two plots in question. I think when we were listening to the subject, she did say that she, you know, looking for a compromise on this. And I think at the back of everything that we're discussing today, and the construction people being here, I think I'm still kind of like wanting them to consider either. I know they've mentioned the 100% of affordability there. But, you know, these 2 units, if it comes to that point where, you know, just at the back of it, for them to think of that, because that's what the subject is saying, you know, compromise. And because they've already reduced some of the, you know, the units, just for them to consider. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Wasn't a question, it was just a comment.
Okay.
So Chair, sorry.
Okay, I'm going to do that in 30 seconds once I've done my question, just for completion. So question of officers, can we enforce the hoarding going up ASAP? The applicants were clear that construction would have that. Is there a part of the construction management plan that we could enforce that? And then also those dust particulate limits, would both of those be covered within?
The requirement for the hoarding is a separate condition which we are proposing under this reserve matters application. As the applicant stated, that could be put up pretty much immediately and it wouldn't need a construction road in place for that to go ahead. The particles are covered under the construction management plan on the outline planning consent, which we yet haven't got an application in, but I think it's very clear from the panel the expectations of the calibre of this report that the applicants are going to have to do in order for it to get the approval from officers.
So in terms of that condition on the hoarding, they've said it's absolutely fine. So can we strengthen the condition we put in on this reserve matters that has to be done before construction of that road?
The condition already states prior to commencement of development. So my view is that strength is already there in the condition.
Okay, so that's the end of member questions to officers. Do any members have comments? Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you, Chair. I say this every time, I'm struggling with this application. But I'll just explain the reasons why, because we've been informed that as decision makers, we have to have due regard to the equality, diversity, inclusion, and integration legislation. And that due regard being that we have to assure ourselves that mitigations proposed have been adequately explored. So that's not to say that having due regard means it must be refused, but that we must explore those mitigations. And for me, what we've heard today, one of those mitigations would be or could be the exploration of moving 2 properties on the site and the attenuation tank and moving that around. And notwithstanding that that's not what's before us, I cannot say that that mitigation has been explored by us, added to which, when I ask questions around the attenuation tank and the changing of dimensions and what information that would have and what that layout looks like, I was informed that we're not even at that stage yet in terms of how that works. So there is a little bit cart before horse. And how do I know that it is not possible to change the way that the attenuation tank is situated and the relevant easements it required, unless the information's been put in foot before us, and then I can tick a box to say that that mitigation has been assessed. So that's why I'm struggling with it. And I think my preference to get out of that I'm minded to suggest that we might suggest that this is deferred so that could be explored before it comes back to panel. That's where my thinking's at, but I'm conscious that other people want to comment. So before I make that as a formal motion, but to put on notice, unless somebody says something fantastically different, I'll probably end up moving that at some point, Chair.
Councillor Ray.
Very similar to what's been said. I think the outline permission for this is what it is. We know it's going to be developed as a residential site. There's no argument over that, but it's about the right residential site in reference to, I think there are 2 points that have come out. The deep sensitivities we have around confidence, whether those mitigation measures have been put in place around the dust, bearing in mind the particulars of this case, and completely accept that this came after a lot of the work was done. And this is not necessarily something that's been hidden from us, because from officers, it's literally a case of the issues were raised after another reports, and perhaps actually if it had been known sooner for a variety of reasons, actually some of that information would have been disclosed sooner to help give members confidence over the equalities impact and where we lie in between our duties of regard. I think there are issues around the bio diversity question in terms of the attenuation pond and the tank. I appreciate, obviously, for the developer, there is a consideration around the it being adopted by Yorkshire Water, and if it's irregular or if it's an attenuation pond, it may not be adopted by Yorkshire Water, and that's obviously a concern that needs to be explored. But I think the general principle that, yes, there is an accepted principle that this site is to be developed for residential. I just don't quite think we're there yet. And again, I won't propose the motion, but I think I'm in the same direction that we probably need to defer and get additional information. One, to resolve our concerns around the attenuation tank and some of the biodiversity questions. But for me, more in particular around actually, do we have confidence as an authority that we're sure of the information we've provided to back up the equalities impact assessment, so that we're making our decision with the proper weight in relation to our need for having due regard to the other legislation that sits outside of the planning authority.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I think there are two elements, aren't we? Brian, this is a difficult one. We're all sitting here trying to work out a way out of this, actually, if we're honest. Two things. I accept Brian's point, actually, about mitigation. And it would seem to us that we do not have the evidence that, in effect, moving these two properties has been explored in a way that we could either accept or reject that as a mitigation. And I think the other element relates to what you were saying about do we have confidence in? Well, if I'm honest with you, I have confidence in our officers to provide us with the best advice they can give us. And I think, given the slight vagaries of when you put in detailed elements for signing off planning conditions, I am confident that our officers can assess those in an appropriate manner. And I do not think, if I'm honest, I'll put my hands up, if you brought them back to Pan's panel, I could do that, because I don't have that expertise. But we employ people who do, and I think we have to accept that they know what they're doing. So it would be really easy, I think, for the rest of us to sit around the table and repeat what I've just said, because I think that's actually what we all think. So let's not muck about. If Ryan proposes that we defer this for one cycle to explore the mitigation that we're suggesting, which is to move two of those units, then I'm more than happy to second that. And I suggest, rather than us talk a long time about something I think we all want to do, we just get on with it.
Councillor Finnegan.
Happy with that, but on top of everything else, we'd like to see, I'd certainly like to see the site management plan, so to make sure that we're as clear as we can do about that. I'd also like to see if we can do slightly better on the biodiversity front as well. But shifting things around, giving it another cycle, see if we can do better at this point. I think we're all conscious of the fact that we need more affordable housing. losing units means some families are going to be penalised as a result of that. We've got to take that into account. But if we can have that, and also have a look at that footpath, which doesn't seem to serve any purpose, but if we can defer and have another look at it.
Councillor Ray?
Just want to clarify the point. I've got complete confidence in our officers to assess the information that's put before them. I just think they need some more technical information put before them so that they can give us that extra reassurance, because they're obviously basing what they're saying off the information they've been given. They've not been given that technical information yet, because that's not normally the process in this stage, but because it's relevant to the discussions we're having, it's actually about making sure that they get that information to double reassure to us, is the point I was trying to make. I think absolute confidence in the officers in terms of them making that judgment, but they've not seen that information to make that judgment in the way they would do at that particular stage, which is obviously when they're discharging the conditions on construction.
Steve, you wanted to say something? Hold on.
I think with respect, Chair, there is this process, isn't there? And I appreciate what you're saying to us, but I'm not, it's not the normal process, and we wouldn't normally expect that. And I think, notwithstanding what your general view is, it will be unreasonable to ask a developer to do something that we're not asking other developers to do. It's reasonable to expect them to follow the due process. I am sure that if technical details are provided to officers which they feel they are not capable of commenting on, they will seek appropriate advice, because that's policy. And therefore, I think we have to accept that if, as in the normal run of things, we had a site management plan, I'm not sure it's the function of this panel to sit down and go through the site management plan in fine detail and decide whether it's right or not. I think our plan, our function is to make a decision in relation to the planning application. And Ryan, though he hasn't quite said it yet, has got a proposal which actually moves that decision-making process forward. The rest of the stuff might well be elements that you could discuss in among that larger question. And if we can get some better biodiversity, thanks very much, I'll take that. Etc. But I think both the developers have listened to what we've all been saying, and I think by now they really should have worked out what our view is. So I think rather than get lost in that argument about the technical advice, it's the basic principle that we need to deal with, and that is that this effectively move the application forward.
Yeah, Steve, if you can come back in.
Right. I'm not trying to be flippant, but a little while ago, Councillor Finnegan said far be it from him to actually agree with me, which is very unusual. Yes, I'm agreeing with what Councillor Campbell said on that particular point. I mean, there are two things there. I understand all the concerns that particularly Councillor Ray's got about the tightening up the construction management plan and the detail, but it wouldn't be appropriate to bring that back here for discussion and approval by the members. It would be for the officers to deal with that. But the only thing I would slightly contradict what Councillor Campbell said is one cycle may be a little bit too tight. So if members are minded to defer the application for effectively the handing of the attenuation tank and those probably the three properties, but with the other things that I talked about, which is the unilateral agreement not to start construction prior to 25, tightening up the construction management plan with all the various details about sprayers, automatic damping, etc., detailed of the dust monitoring. There was also the relocation of the footpath to the north of those properties. That might change again, actually, because it might, if the properties move north, the path might end up being through the centre of the site. And of course, Ian's articulated what how the timescales for the early implementation of the hoarding is covered by the condition. Is that clear for everybody? Which is, I'm basically agreeing with you, Councillor Stevenson.
Right, final comment from Councillor Ray.
I want to be really crystal clear. I am not suggesting for a moment that elected members sit here and go through a report to analyse the dust impact. What I am asking for, bearing in mind it is pertinent to the reason why we went into closed session, it has dominated the questions on this panel, that officers are provided earlier than normal, and I appreciate it's not normal process, but process doesn't always go in a smooth line, and sometimes we have to make alterations to take account of circumstances, that officers get to see the technical data that's been given to the applicant to inform them of their mitigations and why they feel it's suitable, so that officers can, in their subsequent reports, say, we've seen the data and actually we do feel it's suitable, or we do feel it. I am not suggesting for a second that we sit here as non-experts and filter through, pardon the phrase, information about dust reports. I'm asking that officers see it, bearing in mind the sensitivities and our duty to have regard because of the particular case in question and of the main objection to this application, so that they can give us additional reassurance that they are comfortable that data is solid, so that when we do come to make a determination or whatever cycle it comes back, we can have extra confidence in that advice because of its sensitive nature.
Chair, sorry, briefly, I'm just going to apologise to Councillor Ray for my own misunderstanding. Yes, we can do that as part of the defer and obviously further discussions, etc.
Councillor Stevenson.
In the interest of brevity, Chair, can I propose an amended motion, be that with regard to our duties under the Equality Act and the Equality Impact Risk Assessment, that this matter be deferred so the planning officers can discuss with the applicant all mitigating factors, which would include moving the two properties in question with the attenuation tank, and include the assessments in terms of the scaling of that and how that might work, and that then be referred back to panel for a decision.
Could I just make a friendly amendment that we don't mention the attenuation tank, because that's one option, but actually there's a whole site.
Yeah, okay, so moving them and the knock-on consequence of that in terms of the conditions put forward.
Councillor Ray seconded. And that motion also includes Steve's bullet point list. Yes? Okay, all those in favour? You know, oh my God. Unanimous then.
Do I need to? Can I leave it? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, well, before we start the next one, we'll have a 5-7 minute comfort break. Thanks very much. We're now moving on to agenda item number 9. 8. Yes, just this top of the page instead. My mistake. Agenda item number 8, demolition of existing building and construction of a 30-storey residential development totaling 345 apartments with ancillary commercial space on Springwell Road. Can I ask the officer to present the application, please?
Thanks, Chair. This was last reported to members as a position statement on the 6th of July. Members were generally supportive of the principle of the scheme, but had a number of concerns, primarily relating to the height, the impact on the amenities of the occupants of phase 1 adjacent, car parking, provision of green space, and generally making it a more of a community, family orientated development. Just get the panel working. Right, this is the site in question here on the red line. So since panel, the applicant's taken on board the feedback from members and has listened to your concerns and made a number of changes. The primary one is reducing the scale of the building down from 36 stories to 30 stories. Remember, it was originally 46 stories. I'll just take you through the slides, majority of which you have seen before, but I'll just run through those quickly. This is the site in question here. It's the within the Holbeck neighbourhood plan area. That's phase 1, indicated in red there. That's on site. It's substantially built and partly occupied. Phase 2, the current application before us, is to the south. And just a few photos of the phase 1 development that's more substantially complete than what we've got on these photos. Things have moved on a bit since then. There's planting at these upper levels on the phase 1 development, and the hoarding's been removed. This is just plans that you've seen before, just to show the context of an evolving area, I suppose, in this urban landscape of taller buildings. Evident on sections through there that show buildings which have developed or have got planning consent. The site boundary here we've got dotted right, and the building on the far right extremity is Bridgewater Place. Just in terms of scale, Bridgewater Place is 112 metres in height, and we've now got a reduced building that is 94, just over 94 metres, just to give you that perspective. So as well as reducing the height of the building down to 30, that obviously reduces the number of units from just over 400 to now 345 apartments. So this is a site layout of the site in question here, and you can see the white annotated area is the main fabric of the building, which rises up to 30 stories, with the building sat on a podium level, set within landscaping and areas of wind mitigation as well. I'll draw your attention while we've got this slide open just to the area just to the north of the building, where there's a blue shaded area. That's a children's play area that's at podium level that spills out from an internal play area. I'll come on to some more slides later. In terms of the configuration of the building, this is the ground floor. So the orange area is the entrance where residents would enter. The pink area is a flexible commercial stroke community space as well. And then we've got the parking area, the kind of orange, slightly peachy colour to the right. Members had concerns about the amount of car parking provided before. There was only 18 spaces proposed before. That was for just over 400 units. And the applicant has increased that, not a significant amount, but it has increased it by 9 spaces. So it goes from 18 to 27. And then coupled with the reduction of the number of units means that there is, percentage-wise, there's an increased provision of on-site car parking. The next slide is the basement level. Yeah, so that's the basement level there, with a number of cycle parking spaces located within it. And the next slide is the podium level. So that's the bit that's elevated up from ground level. And the white area at the front of the building to the left is the double height atrium space that residents would enter into when coming into the building. The main changes at this level here is that the applicant has just completely got rid of the swimming pool from the proposal, and they've also reduced the size of the gym as well. And to compensate for that, they've increased or improved and provided a community stroke internal children's play area. So that's the upper orange area, if you like. So the smaller reduced gym is the orange area to the bottom of the picture, and the upper area is above that is a family stroke children's play area that's accessed from a ground floor atrium area. And I've got some images of that I'll come on to. The next slides just show the upper levels of the scheme. This one in particular shows the affordable housing proposals, which are fully compliant, 7%, equating to 24 units in total, and these would be located on floors 2, 3 and 4. I think before there was a disparity and I suppose a locational gap between some of the affordable housing in that some of them were located in significant distances apart on upper floors. And here the applicant has managed to locate them all together on floors 2, 3 and 4. And you have got a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom affordable units to reflect the mix of the private accommodation. And then we just move up the building in floors, I think that's floor 4 to 14, mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. And as you get higher up, there are a number of 3 bedroom units, all of which have outlook and daylight through habitable windows to all sides of the building. So you haven't got any internal rooms, if you like. And now we move up to the top floor. So to the left-hand side of the building, you've got an externally located roof garden. So that's enclosed by 3-meter glazing, which would be then open to the elements above. And then further down to the side of the building, you've got an enclosed internal sky garden with plants and seating. That's similar to the external one, but it essentially has a glass lid on it. Also to note as well, just off the external sky garden is a community room as well that the applicants have introduced at roof level. And then move into the very top of the building. This is the roof, the actual roof level with the PV panels that are mounted on the roof. In terms of accessible units, to qualify and comply with policy H10, the applicant has proposed a number of units, in fact 8 wheelchair accessible units on floors 18 to 25 that comply with part M43. And also all of the remaining units will all comply with part M2 in that they will all be adaptable. That's well over the policy limitation, which sets it at 30%. This is actually providing all of the remaining units to be all accessible, adapted. Just looking at the story heights as well, that's the reduced scale of the building at 30 stories. This one is probably more relevant in that it shows the existing phase 1 development adjacent, sat at 16 stories there. So it's still a significant building at 30 stories. And this shows just various sections through showing the local context in an area that has got emerging tall buildings that have got permission or have been developed over time that you've seen from the last presentation. And again, a slide just showing the materials in terms of the glazing and the perforated panels to provide more of a lightweight building than some of the solid brick buildings that you've got in the local vicinity. In terms of sunlight and daylight, members had some concerns of how this building might impact on the amenities of the occupants of phase 1. So looking at the sun path diagram and the impact on that shared or what would be a shared podium space in terms of external amenity, you look at the sun path and how this would have an effect. And together with the distances between the 2 buildings ranging from 35 to 45 to 50 metres, which is quite significant, a reduction of the building from 36 stories down to 30 stories does reduce the impact somewhat. I mean, there's still no getting away from the fact it will have some impact. I can't ignore that fact. A 30-story building will have some degree of impact. But looking at the sun path and during later periods during the afternoon, on the left-hand diagram there, the sun will transverse past the building and provide light and sunlight into the shared podium space. And the applicants looked at the building research establishments guidelines on sunlight and daylight, and in particular looked at the vertical sky component statistics in terms of how a window or habitable rooms are affected by buildings close by. What it inevitably shows is that buildings with darker colour down at the ground floor elements are more affected than some of the units towards the upper levels that are lighter shaded. But in officers' view, that's an acceptable situation, which has occurred elsewhere in high-rise city centre developments and in where you've got fairly dense urban locations. Just moving on to some of the visuals as well. This shows the context in terms of how it would appear adjacent to the phase 1 development. That's a view on Whitehall Road there, both on the left and also on the right, standing back further west along Whitehall Road, with, if anyone's familiar with the Dunelm shop behind you. And again, looking along Whitehall Road as well, that's the bridge over the canal there, and looking at the context, the darker colour building is phase 1, so that's 16 stories, and then that shows the emerging context of what's been approved on adjacent sites as well. So it clearly shows a development site that's evolving and will change over time. That's a view looking down Springwell Road, down the side of the site, and we talked about the wind mitigation measures as well that would be required to make the development acceptable. And these are in the form of still the tree sculptures, which are still the theme of what is being proposed here. And that will provide the necessary mitigation and also provides visual interest as well at street level. And having discussed and considered the amended wind mitigation survey and having that reviewed by the council's independent consultant, it's concluded that the reduction in height of the building would have a positive impact on wind conditions in and around the site, and the screens, the partitions, the baffles, and also the tree sculptures will all help mitigate that wind impact, but also provide some form of visual interest as well at ground level. We've also discussed the scheme with the council's access officer as well, who's supportive in principle. We just asked for some details on the colour coding of the bases of those units as well, so you get a contrast to the colour of the paving, so it doesn't blend into one. So through planning condition, we're asking for further details of the wind mitigation measures to be provided, in particular on a different colour of the base units to make them stand out against the paving. In terms of green space as well, members were concerned that this quite an urban environment doesn't have the benefit of immediate green space nearby, and clearly a development of this scale can't provide the on-site requirement for green space in compliance with G4, as most city centre sites can't. And we looked at the local area, and we went and discussed it with ward members, and the nearest park where some form of mitigation and contributions could be spent would be Holbeck Moor Park, which is a good 800 to 900 metres away, and that's the nearest reasonably sized area of green space where mitigation could be used. But there are also pockets of green space between that site and this application site where green space enhancements could be utilised as well. And ward members are trying to put a scheme forwards to enhance Holbeck Moor Park as well, and this would be a welcome contribution to help facilitate some of those projects which are envisaged over the next few years. In terms of looking at some more 3D colour images as well, this is a view looking at into the atrium area as well. So on the ground floor, that would be the entrance that residents would be greeted with when they enter the building. And then you can see on the upper mezzanine or podium level, you can see the gym to the right, and that's separated by a dividing wall with the children's play area to the left, which then spills out onto the podium. So if you just keep your mind focused on the top left image of the internal space there, that's an artist's impression of how it could appear inside. So you can see it's more geared up to families and children. And looking out of those doors as well, that would then spill out onto the external podium level, where on days of good weather, families and children could utilise the space externally as well. So I think that's quite a a good selling point and quite a good asset for the development. But this is the space for, you could say, for the adults as well. This is the roof gardens, which protected by the wind, by these 3-metre clear screens. So it is a complete safe both for adults and for children as well. There's no way that people could climb over or risk any danger. It's fully enclosed all around, but open to the elements there. And there's also an internal sky garden as well. So quite a good level of amenity on the podium level, but also at the top of the building. Just in terms of a couple of corrections to the report, paragraph 38, I've made reference to the site allocations plan that the adjacent site is designated. I've got actually, there's a typo on the report at paragraph 38. It should read site allocations plan number or site number EG1-22. Also, I've made reference to the draft Tall Buildings Design Guide at SPD, which has been out for consultation. I've been advised that the council has decided not to take this forward, and therefore I would like to draw members' attention to deleting reference to consideration of that draft guidance. However, the principles of considering this application in terms of tall buildings has been considered in the context of the current adopted Tall Buildings Design Guide, which advocates clustering buildings in clusters, which clearly this does, given the evolving nature of this area, with the amount of tall buildings that are currently evolving on site and sites that have got building permission for tall buildings. So I would just remove reference to that within the report. So in summary, there are positive amendments that the applicants have made following the position statement. The reduction in 30 stories certainly has helped the visual impact and also the impact on residential amenity in what is an emerging area of other tall buildings. It's more community and family orientated, which is positive. It has more car parking. We've got clarity on how the green space contributions could be spent on possible schemes in the area, and that's been discussed with ward members. It still delivers the policy requirement element of affordable housing. It provides accessible housing and in excess of the accessible housing policy standards. And it also still delivers the other Section 106 contributions in terms of the green space sum, bus shelter, travel plan fund, and contributions to cycle schemes as well. So on balance, it's considered that the development is a sustainable form of development which accords with the development plan, and it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Now, we've got no speakers in relation to this item, but we do have the agents in attendance should any members wish to ask them questions. So with that, have members got any questions for officers, or we can request the agents come up as well? Any questions? Oh, I do.
I think Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Taylor, did you?
It's still coming.
No, she was just miming in the corner. I see. Wind mitigation in phases condition. Is that in relation to what we talked about last time in terms of the wind mitigation not being just at the end, and as the stories go up, that mitigation is put in? Can I just confirm that's the case, please?
It is, yes, and it actually might not be necessary. I think we need to take a bit more advice on that as to what amount of mitigation is required as the development progresses. So I don't think we're certain of actually that is actually necessary, that it needs to go in right from the start. Yeah, I think in summary, I think it needs to be addressed further, really. But I think to give us that level of comfort, we still wanted to impose that condition, nevertheless.
Thank you. And then I do have a question for agents, if that's okay. If somebody could bob up for me, please. I'll wait till you're here before I ask.
You've got Andrew Windress and Nick Brown.
Okay. And it is relatively quick. and this comes from a position of absolutely loving the children's room, and I'm really glad that I pushed for it last time, but I just wanted to check in terms of the items in it, how much of that is stuff you're providing in terms of, you could see the little sort of pyramidal soft stuff and whatnot. Is that all stuff that the developer's providing, or is that there as an artist's impression of what the residents could provide?
At this stage, we certainly haven't gone into that level of detail. It is an artist's impression. Yeah, absolutely. There will be, clearly outside, there was a lot more fixed equipment in that sense. The internal space was seen as being more flexible, something geared up to welcoming families more. Exactly what goes in there, there'll be an operator ultimately at the end of it. So we have the developer building it, and then there'll be a more operator manager. So that's something which will come a bit further down the line, but the emphasis that all the fixed elements are geared up towards families. Yes.
So from that, I can confirm that it won't end up as an empty room with nothing in it. Perfect. Thank you. That was it. Thank you. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. I'm looking at the increase in car parking provision, and that's very welcome. 50% obviously is substantial, and it's in fact more than 50%, as was said, because of the number of units within the development has been reduced. I'd still be glad of a little bit of reassurance here. I know this is something that I did raise when this came to us last time. Do we have any evidence that this level of provision is going to work? I mean, I get with the location and the nature of the development and the likely inhabitants that it's reasonable to assume a low level of car ownership. It's just, we're saying now, I think if you take phrases 1 and 2 together, we're saying 1 parking space for eight dwellings. Do we have any evidence that's viable? I'm wondering if phase 1 tells us anything that's useful there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rowntree. I'm going to bring in Catherine, if you're happy to introduce yourself as well as you come in. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Catherine Chimoli from Highways. Thank you, Chair. To answer the question, we've assessed the parking against implementation of travel plan measures, contribution towards TRO implementation or alterations on streets. So for the location of the site, there is no minimum requirement. Yeah, as you've said, you've understood that. It's maximum, the standard says maximum. So unless there is a demonstration that it will cause detrimental impact, which we've tried to mitigate through the travel plan measures, through contributions towards cycling and pedestrian improvements, cycle parking is above what we normally ask for. So we feel it will work for the location.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, sort of clearly you've planned it out very thoroughly. I think what I'm asking is, could you point to somewhere and say, look, this is the level of a similar kind of building, and say, look, this was done here, or this was done in Sheffield in a similar type of site, and it works. This level of parking provision is okay. We know that we can go ahead with that.
I don't have that information now, but we can get it to the chair. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions before I move to comments? No? Anyone with comments? Councillor Ray.
Much better, I think, is the honest answer. I'd still like more parking, but sometimes you win some, you lose some. I think I was quoted last time as saying it was ridiculous. So I still think it's a bit too low, but it's not quite as ridiculous now. I think the overall change is much better. It's much more balanced. It's much more focused on it being a sustainable community building rather than something just for people who are in the 20s or 30s, etc. That kind of classic idea of what a city centre resident is, which is changing. I think the focus on downsizing the gym, removing the swimming pool and putting in a proper family room and proper community space is better, and is actually something I would hope all developers in the city centre, as the building start taking on board. These are long-term permanent communities now, and things like this should become the standard. So hopefully I won't be quoting the Evening Post and saying this is ridiculous this time, because it's much, much better. And I think some of the think changes you've made, one, have shown respect to this panel and the authority for your listening, and secondly, should become more standardised in many of our city centre developments. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like you, I can't understand why you'd want a large gym. In fact, I can't understand why you'd want a gym at all, but that's just a personal view. And certainly the provision for younger people is welcome, because that, I think that's probably a first, or very nearly a first. And I'm assuming that will maintenance of that facility will be part of the management agreement. Just to touch on the parking, I think it's fair to say that city plans, who pass loads of stuff down there, have done it on much lower parking levels. And quite frankly, by the time you've got all the yellow lines that you're proposing down there in, there's no way you can park. I will flag up, however, the amenity space for the outdoor amenity space for residents. In that, I raise this every time, which relates to, it's a warm day, it's a warm evening in June, you get home from work. Where do you just go and sit for half an hour? And the space round about this building is at best tight. And I have to say to you that the green space amenity contribution that you're talking about doesn't really address the issue. So what you're really saying is we're using this money to, in effect, subsidise parks to do what they should be doing anyway, which is maintain a park. We're not creating new spaces. And if you look at the totality of development in that particular area, and it is substantial, we're talking about, if it's 300 odd units, we're talking well in excess of 400 individuals who are going to be in a situation and not have the sort of, even a small space, a green space to go and sit out in. And I do think that, though this is probably gone too far, in my opinion, but we should be saying much more clearly to developers, we expect green space on site. We know you can buy out of it because the legislation says you can, but the default position should be the green amenity space should be on site. And that's my one real reservation about this particular development.
Councillor Finnegan?
EM1 figures, please.
Noted. I have a couple of comments. I am absolutely delighted that this is having that space that is appropriate for young people. And I really, I'm genuinely really proud that that's where this panel has got to and where you guys have got to. I think it's changing for the future, and that's really brilliant. So I want that noted. One of my other roles in council is obesity champion. So I'm just making a plea rather than a question that the gym on the, again, it's on the images, so it's an artist impression, but if the gym could have the lower half of the glass frosted, that would give a measure of privacy, which for people who may not want to be seen by everyone in the reception area in the gym would provide that. Of course, that doesn't just extend to those people living with obesity. Before I do the sum up, well, I won't do the sum up before I get Steve to do the sum up and call for a vote. Is there any final comments? No? Would you like to sum up at all?
The recommendation in front of you is to defer and delay to the Chief Planning Officer approval subject to specified conditions as listed.
So Councillor Ray has proposed, Councillor Cavani has seconded. All those in favour? Unanimous. Lovely, thank you. We'll just wait for officers to change over.
Chair, while officers are changing over, can I ask a question before we get to the last item and we all slope off? Is somebody collecting the papers because of the pink? Right.
Yeah, the clerk will do that. If you can just leave them on the desks. Thanks, Councillor Campbell. That's helpful. So we now move to agenda item number 9, which is an application under section 106A for the modification or discharge of planning obligations pursuant to section 106A of the Town and Country Planning Act, to remove the build to rent and PRS covenants at the former Airedale Mills site. I wanted to bring your attention that we have today got an application relating to an amendment to a section 106 agreement in Airedale Mills. This application has been brought to Plans Panel in accordance with the Chief Planning Officer's delegation arrangements, whereby the Chair, in consultation with Chief Planning Officer, both consider that this application should be presented and determined by members. This has come to Plans Panel given the significance of the change, whereby delivery of 100% affordable housing is now proposed. Could I ask Mike to present, please?
Thank you, Chair. The deed of variation before you today seeks to modify the existing section 106 agreement to the previously granted outline permission to remove build to rent covenant, allowing the applicant to remove restrictions surrounding affordable housing provision. Just to remind members, I've just got a couple of slides. So, thanks. Just to remind members, this is a site in question. It's between the River Aire and Leeds Liverpool Canal, with the Rodley Nature Reserve to the north of the site. Again, just for information, an aerial shot showing the site just centrally there, the triangular piece of land, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And just finally, the slide just indicates the proposed layout, which was approved as part of the Reserve Matters application previously by committee. So the changes proposed to the section 106 are summarised within the panel pack, with members' attention drawn to paragraph 2. Just to summarise, these changes comprise of the following: the inclusion of definitions of affordable housing, with the removal of reference of definitions relating to affordable units alongside references to benchmark affordable units. Removing restrictions on occupying benchmark affordable units only as such, and thus allowing the provision of additional affordable housing on the site. Inclusion of a registered provider's exclusion clause, allowing the provider to provide, again, additional affordable housing. And finally, additional flexibility to provide, as is outlined, 100% affordable housing. And this allows any open market dwellings to be utilised as affordable housing. The application has been publicised, with members' attention drawn to one objection, which has been received from Rodley Nature Reserve, and this raises concerns with the following issues: concerns surrounding the access to the reserve, along with maintenance to the access in perpetuity. Rodley Nature Reserve considers it's important that the development is owned and operated by a single entity with adequate resources to maintain the access. Just to sum up and just to provide clarity on paragraph 9, this outlines there are no planning policies relevant to the application. I've actually slightly misworded that. It should reference that policy H5 is actually relevant, because obviously that relates to affordable houses, and the original 15% provision, which is now to change to 100% affordable housing. So there is a relevant policy there. So just to conclude, the deed of variation is considered to be acceptable by officers, given the wider benefits proposed through the creation of a development which seeks to create 100% affordable housing, and thus adding a significant number of units within the city. It's considered allowing such flexibility to an affordable housing provider is acceptable, and the proposed changes do not undermine the aims of the original section 106. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a speaker here against the proposal. Could I invite them to the table? Once you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes to share. Well, not share, because there's just one of you actually, to present your case.
Okay. Right, I'm Jerry Knapp. I'm one of the trustees of the Rothley Nature Reserve. I don't want to spend too long talking about this. We are concerned about this partly because it's couched so much in development and planning terms that it's difficult for a layman or a woman to understand. But we're concerned that we need to guarantee access to the reserve and Rothley Cricket Club in perpetuity. In the past, there were ideas that this site would have a bridge management company made up of residents on the site who would manage the bridge. Given the track record of construction of the bridge and the problems that have been associated with it, it's a matter of concern if we were left eventually with a situation where local residents were managing the bridge. The idea of a single owner of a build to rent site is actually very attractive to us because it means there's a substantial body with resources with an interest in maintaining access for its residents. Looking at the application and the papers, it's hard to see how that guarantee of our access, not just for people working on the nature reserve, but the public who use it to a large extent, it's a big community resource. It's hard to see how that's going to be guaranteed given this situation. If you remove the build to rent thing, that suggests that houses will be sold. And eventually, if houses are sold, we'll have a situation where there is less incentive for the owner, or probably no incentive for the owners to maintain access or have the ability to do that. And that's our concern. We're looking for the long-term interest. It may only occur in a week, in a year or two, but long-term interests. We're also concerned about maintenance of the ecology buffer area, which is essential to the reserve and the wildlife in the area.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for the speaker? Unless you'd like to come in first.
Well, I'll
come on in then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst you were talking, sort of a thought crossed my mind on this, and it may need modifying with the comments you've just made, but you've got three bodies. You've got the residents, yourself, and the cricket club. Would the formation of something like a CIC to look after the bridge and the ecology buffer, made up of people from all three entities, actually help solve the problem? I take on board what you say about if people move out and new people turn up, what do you do then if they're on the board of the CIC? But that should be something that's manageable, and it would be a clause within the constitution of the CIC.
We're looking to the long term. At the moment, I'm pretty certain that the cricket club and the nature reserve wouldn't be able to engage in running that bridge, operating and managing it and maintaining it. We don't have the resources, we don't have the expertise to do that. And what we would look to have is some conditions imposed to ensure that the site was not sold off. The individual houses, that there remained a single owner to guarantee the site. And I can't see that happening in any other way. I don't understand why, to get 100%, we applaud the idea of 100% affordable housing. I can't see why you need to get rid of that, get rid of the build to rent to achieve that. I don't understand that. There may be a very good reason for it, and maybe we ought to explore other ways of doing it other than getting rid of the build to rent condition.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring Steve in quickly now. Thank you.
Trust me, I'm no lover of this bridge. I think there's a big confusion here with Mr. Knapp. It's not referred to in the section 106 in terms of the future maintenance of this, but it goes back to a document which I've not brought with me because it is literally about this thick, which is a collaboration agreement was signed prior to the application being brought, well, sorry, not signed, it drafted rather, it's not been signed as yet. But what that does, under the terms of that, there's an easement and it covers the ownership and responsibility for the future maintenance of the bridge. And that lies with the bridge management company, which is basically Rodley Bridge Management Company, which was set up in 2022 for that purpose. Now, that is currently owned by a company called Rodley Limited, which are allied to Dynamic Capital, who are the owners of the site at the moment. But ultimately, one of the main reason for this being brought forward is the original developer, which had an agreement with Dynamic Capital, has actually effectively walked away from the site. So what's ultimately happening is a new developer's coming in who has different aspirations for it. So the layout and everything else that goes with it stays the same, excepting they want to change it to a wholly affordable site, whereas before it was only 15%. And in terms of the legalities of that, it was thought better to change that legally rather than just accept that over 15% was being provided, because you could argue we only asked for 15. If they provide 15, great, they've done what they need to do. If they provide 85% more, that's up to them. But there is a bridge management company and there are provisions within that document that if the bridge management company fails with its maintenance obligations, etc., then the responsibility falls to Yorkshire Water and Leeds City Council. But that is already there in the background. So I just thought I'd say that because I don't really want to get involved with the bridge again, but there is this collaboration agreement that's close to being signed that covers the in perpetuity aspect of the maintenance of the bridge. And it goes into detail about how much money will be spent and put aside in escrow agreements and all that junk. And I say it's nearly that thick.
Yeah. Our legal officer needs to come in. Thank you.
So just for the purposes of members of panel, just to add to what Steve has just said, for the purposes of determining this application for the modification of the 106, the maintenance of the bridge, the ownership of the bridge, it's all actually not relevant. And so what you need to be looking at is the change from a build-to-rent model to 100% affordable housing acceptable in planning terms? And as you've heard from the officer, it far exceeds our policy H5.
Did you still want to make a comment?
We obviously aren't a party or aware of the details of the collaboration agreement. I would say over the last 5 or 6 years we've been dealing with this. There are major trust issues of developers between ourselves and the developers. It's not perhaps surprising. In addition to, I can understand the collaboration agreement covers the management of the bridge. We're also concerned about the maintenance of the ecology buffer, and I'm not clear whether the collaboration agreement covers that, or if the site is sold off bit by bit, who is going to maintain the fences to ensure the security of the ecology buffer, which is responsible for protecting the reserve and the wildlife corridor?
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members? To Mr. Knapp for now? No? In which case, we have a speaker here against the proposal. Could I invite them to the table? And once you're ready, you'll have... Oh, yes, my mistake. Everyone's just against. Yes, indeed. The next bullet point down, we have speakers in support of the application. Can I invite them to the table? And when you're ready, you will still have 4 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Phil Gregory. I'm a solicitor who is instructed by Dynamic Capital Rodley Limited, who is the developer. And I'm really here was just to respond to some of those questions that was raised. And I think it's been picked up actually, but there is a collaboration agreement which has been signed and is in place. And the parties that include Leeds City Council, they include the developer, they include Yorkshire Water, who own the reserve, the nature reserve site. And there's incredibly long-winded and detailed provisions around how that bridge is going to be maintained in perpetuity. and the contributions that come from the site. So I just wanted to clarify that that was the case. And I suppose just to reconfirm that the original application was brought forward by Moda, who decided not to take that forward. So in accordance with the agreement with Rodley Limited and Dynamic Capital, Rodley Limited have stood into that application. The intention now is to take this forward in a different manner, and the parties that are interested are looking at the more affordable housing model. And just to pick up another point, doing that as a build to rent doesn't work for them necessarily. They want the ability to do shared ownership, right to buy, staircasing, and this restriction is going to restrict that, because it all has to be built to rent. So the abilities in the 106 already to provide for additional affordable. It really is this restriction on the build to rent that we're trying to remove, to allow that flexibility going forward.
Just to briefly interject, I did actually allude to this earlier, but it is just this one item of the 106 in terms of, as it stands at the moment, the layout and all the other restrictions and details in the section 106 agreement as was discussed with yourselves, even down to the elevations of the properties, etc. I can't guarantee that might not change at some point in the future. But as I say, everything else at the moment, and that includes the management of the ecology buffers, etc., that was referred to by Mr. Now, are still covered by the original section 106 and will be carried over.
So you don't need any more, Councillor Ray. Thank you. I just called you Mr. Ray then. That was formalised. Councillor Bromley.
So with this now being a new project for social housing, an area that will be responsible for giving affordable housing, having more social responsibility to people and those at their houses, do you think you'll be able to build a relationship, hopefully positively, with Rodley Nature Reserve, so that ongoing in the future this could now start to be something that's actually going to be social responsibility and environmentally responsible together?
I'm sure that's the case. I mean, there will be a separate housing affordable housing provider who is going to acquire the site, so it will be for them to do that. But I'm sure, and I'll go say on behalf of my client, that is always been the intention. I appreciate there has been difficulty around that, but the intention now is to contract with a party who will then take this forward on that basis.
Councillor Finnegan.
How many units are we going to get where it's going to be an affordable rent? Because I've read that 2 or 3 times, the whole blurb at the beginning. I have no bloody idea what you're on about, to be honest. How many affordable homes, that is, homes to rent at an affordable rent, are we going to get out of this in comparison to what we would have got on the previous section 106?
Well, on the previous scheme, it was going to be 15%. And it was only going to be 15%. There will be at least 15% here. The difference is they might not, and there might not be no rentable ones. They might all be done under a right to buy or a different model. But the scheme has to be put forward and approved by the council under the 106.
In fact, as a supplementary at this particular point, so in terms of houses to rent, I might be worse off on this agreement than the previous one, because the previous one, at the very least, usually splits, and I usually get some affordable homes to rent at an affordable rent. As you're saying, potentially with this new agreement, I might not get any. I might have got a few, might have got a handful. You might argue 15%, and I might have got, I don't know, 6 or 7. At this stage, you're saying that the possibility is I get none. Is that right?
You will get at least 50% affordable houses, and they will either be rented, or rights to buy, or under a scheme which is agreed pursuant to the 106. But the intention is that it's going to be significantly more than that. The minute the intention is 100%.
Can I just clarify? Are you saying that you're aiming for 50% or above rather than 100% affordable housing on this site?
The party that is looking to acquire this is looking to do a 100% affordable scheme. The provision, the revised proposals and the revised 106, which has been put forward, is a minimum of 15% with the ability to do more. And that's what the current 106 provides for.
I'm just going to call a 2-minute comfort break if anyone wants to nip to the loo, while we can just clarify some things. Thank you.
Chair, can I just make a request in this discussion?
Okay, are all the members back in the room? Okay, I'm going to refer this straight back to Steve, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to, apologies. Could I just clarify the answer on, so I gave you the correct answer in terms of rental. What the revised 106 says, which reverts to what the original 106 said under the outline, is that there'd be 60% would be affordable rents. So the 15% will be a minimum of 40% affordable housing in the traditional sense, and 60% will be rented. And then the scheme needs to be put to the council and approved when it's ready to be finalised. So it'll be a 60-40 split. I just wanted to clarify that, sorry.
Sorry, there seems to be a disagreement here in what we've considered, because our understanding when we talked as Paul Ross at the beginning of this, that this was for a 100% affordable site. What you seem to be saying, putting aside what you just said to Councillor Finnegan about the split, is that actually you want the flexibility to at least provide 15, but possibly up to 100%. But we've considered this application throughout as being wholly 100% affordable, not something in between 15, 85 or 60 or whatever. But what you've just said is different to what we have brought before members and what our understanding was in considering this. So unless you can again confirm that this is meant to be 100% affordable, this application, I would suggest to the chair, is actually deferred to understand it, because I'm afraid you've said something different to what we've considered throughout.
Well, we're sat here today, the intention is this to be a 100% affordable scheme. What we're slightly fearful of is the same issue that we had with the Moda scheme, is that it then falls down and we're left having to deal with that. So now, if my client's not here, but if I can be allowed to go and make a phone call, I can ask if he's happy for us to proceed on the basis of a 100% affordable scheme.
I think, Chair, given where we are and given the time of night and the fact that we've been here for a while, quite frankly, there seems to be a lack of clarity. So therefore, I will propose that we defer this application for a period of time to allow officers to discuss further with the applicant what they actually want, and then bring back to panel a clear indication, probably with a draft section 106 agreement that says what's going on. Because at the moment, I have no idea what we're doing here.
For the sake of the 2 or 3 minutes it will take to make a phone call, are you happy to postpone that motion for the phone call's purpose?
Actually, no, Chair, I'm not, because I think there is a complete lack of clarity, and a phone call will not, in my opinion.
Sorry, it's been seconded anyway, so it's not possible anymore to hold it off. So who was it seconded by? Sorry, I didn't see. Councillor Gamani. Okay, in which case we'll move to a vote for deferral. All those in favour? I'll defer it too. Okay.
I know I keep on asking the same question, but I really do want to understand the number of affordable homes, not EN1, to be placed here. Not on this occasion, although the information on EN1 is always welcome. Can we have clarity on because we have this vague sort of affordable homes, it's almost like this vague, what does that actually mean? I'm interested in homes to rent and an affordable rent, and I want to know the numbers, because if not, I was going to vote against this anyway, because there's lack of clarity, and I've read it 2 or 3 times about what exactly we're getting.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. If
Sorry, yeah, understand that completely, Councillor Finnegan. I do have to say that actually I know this is after the decision, so I'm not trying to change that at all. But the information that's been put forward by the solicitor at the end has not been communicated to us. We have been working on a wholly 100% affordable site, not somewhere above 15 or in between. I just want to make that clear. And I understand the complete lack of clarity because it's hit me now. So it's correct that it's deferred. I accept that completely.
Okay, in which case we'll move to the next agenda item, which is the date and time of next meeting, which is proposed as Thursday, the 23rd of November at 1:30 p.m. That concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you for your attendance contributions. I now declare the meeting closed. Can we turn off the live stream? Thank you.